Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Extra Serving, a Nation's Restaurant News podcast, our first of the new year. I'm your host, Holly Petre. Today, we're going to be talking about C-suite changes. There were a lot just on Wednesday alone. So we're going to be talking about what that means for the industry and what it means for the future of this year. What's in store for this year in terms of C-suite changes? Is this just a sign of the future? And then we're going to be talking about wellness products for the new year. Lots of green salads, lots of the traditional healthy start to the new year. Are consumers tired of this? We're going to talk about that. Then we're also going to talk about rent delinquency for December. It was very high, and usually a month when restaurants are doing really well. So we're going to talk about what this means for restaurants and what it holds for January. But before we get into that, let me turn it over to my two co-hosts.
I am Sam Oches, Editor-in-Chief of Nation's Restaurant News.
And I'm Leigh Anne Zinsmeister, Managing Editor of Nation's Restaurant News.
Okay, now let's get into this week's podcast while you are both very hungry. So let's start with talking about food to get it out of the way.
Okay, yeah, sure. Let's talk about food. I like it. I'm pro-food.
We never do that around here.
Yeah, why would we talk about food?
I mean, we were just talking about chicken, but now it's time to talk about salads.
Okay, let's talk about salads. And to talk
just
about
in time
salads,
for that
let's bring in
Alicia.
Alicia.
Hi.
Alicia,
How do you
what do
feel
you have to say
about
about salads?
I could use a few
I hear that.
for my extraordinarily gluttonous past 2 weeks.
Yep, same.
Well, so basically a lot of restaurant chains consistently, this happens every year, this is not new for 2023, offer salads and wellness products. I mean, Chipotle's offering some new bowls that are focused on being healthy. Are consumers tired of getting this message? I mean, I feel like this year, so I belong to Equinox Gym, and Equinox refused to bring anybody new on for January 1st. They said that this is not what we're about. We're not starting new changes. And so I think that consumers are kind of leaning more toward this kind of not wanting to have this new start anymore. I think the consumer landscape is changing. What do you guys think?
Equinox doesn't want new customers? What? Is that how I
Just for
heard
January
that?
1st. Just January 1st. January 2nd, they let on new people, but January 1st, they were like, no new people.
Okay,
That
so the
sounds like a
gym...
marketing thing in itself. That sounds like now we're marketing toward people who hate New Year's.
And it's working because we're talking about it, I guess, because...
And we don't even cover Equinox.
Why would a gym say no new customers on the week of their best business of the year? I guess, well, to answer your question, Holly, no, I don't think customers are over it. I think this is a rite of passage every year where every year, we talk about, like Alicia just did, and I concurred, that I need to diet. I ate way too much over the holiday, and it's top of mind that I do not take care of myself. Therefore, this is when we all think about it. It's most top of mind for us. That will never be any different. And restaurants are reaping the rewards of that by offering new salads and bowls and healthy things to remind customers, hey, you're dieting now because it's New Year's and you have a New Year's resolution. Why not do so with us?
Yeah, I think if customers weren't interested in this, then restaurant brands wouldn't be doing it. And also notably, the ones that we've really seen this week, Chipotle, Sweetgreen, are the two that I'm thinking of, are those fast casual brands that lean into this health and wellness thing anyway, any chance they get. Maybe Chipotle not so much, but fast casual as a segment skews that way these days, especially with the salads. So I think that's notable. And yeah, I mean, there must be consumers out there who are interested in this and doing it this way and who are all over these promotions.
Yeah, can I add that I think that this is actually going in the opposite direction, where consumers aren't tired of it. In fact, they're becoming more interested in it. And I mean, everything right now is about millennials and Gen Z. They have the most spending power. They're starting to have families. Brands are aggressively pursuing, especially Gen Z. And these consumers are far more sophisticated about what they put into their bodies than Gen X and above. And this has been reflected in countless surveys. They understand that processed food is bad for them. They understand how crappy they feel. and how food can make a difference in sort of changing that. That, you know, I think, and in those countless surveys, they have noted that they want to eat healthy in January and July, whatever, overall. And, you know, we see this reflected in Gen Z drinks less alcohol than their predecessors. And,
weirdos.
You know, weirdos. I don't get it.
Honestly.
But, you know, we see this reflected not just at restaurant usage, but in the fact that they do buy less processed food at the grocery store, the fact that they do have less interest in alcohol, and so on and so forth. So I think that this is a major opportunity for restaurants to capitalize again as those consumers become even more sophisticated about food, the food wellness equation.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Despite my question, I still am on a diet currently, and I'm looking for a healthy salad to eat for lunch today because I did not bring my lunch.
I'm glad you got from this that we were all accusing you of not dieting, Holly.
Right.
We're not even recording. This is a Holly intervention.
It is. Well, so, you know, that's kind of what is going on with restaurant food. Now I'll move all of you from being hungry over to let's talk about some news. So we're not going to be, because I'm getting hungry, even me. So we'll move over to some news. Yesterday was we record on Thursdays. Yesterday, Wednesday, was a huge day for the C-suite. I mean, I think we had almost 10 C-suite moves in just one day. And big ones. We had some CEOs, we had some presidents. Sam's going to go check my math. That was a total number that I threw off the top of my head.
I remember, I can name 2, but yeah, if it's close to 10, we're rounding up, sure.
We've had,
in the C-suite?
I counted before this call. We've had 9 this week, which has only been 2.5 days so far. So, yes.
That's
So I wasn't that far off.
Sure.
So let's talk a little bit about the C-suite moves. I mean, there's some big ones. John Sawinski left. We have a new CEO at Blaze, but there's other ones too. So what do you guys have to say about the fact that we're seeing so many C-suite moves in the first week of the month, the first week of the year?
I will say it's not unusual to see a surge at the beginning of January. I looked back at our coverage from last year, and there were more than usual the first 2 weeks of January. Not to this level. As you said, 9 in 2 days is a huge number, and they're big names from big companies. But overall, the volume doesn't necessarily surprise me. But yeah, there's some interesting things going on. A lot of these, the bigger ones especially, have been, I think, a long time coming under wraps. I mean, there's been speculation about Blaze's C-suite for a couple months now. The way the Applebee's transition was announced makes me think that they've known for a good long while that this was coming. And they were all just waiting to pull the trigger. And January 1st, in that sense, makes sense. It's a good time to, release a press release. You don't want to do it right before the holidays, and they probably
don't want to sneak it in
a month ago. Yeah, you don't want to news dump that John Sawinski is leaving Applebee's
on a Friday at 5 p.m.
Although, I mean, sure,
December 23rd.
Sometimes there could be an argument for it. Obviously, a news dump is a strategy when you don't want a lot of people to see the news. So certainly, if there is not amicable parting of ways or an ugly parting of ways, that could be seen as, holidays is a good time to do it, because I wasn't checking my email, and I don't think you guys were either, hopefully. So,
Alicia
but
was,
this is not that.
Alicia was.
Alicia has a strange addiction to it.
I would language.
I can't get her to stop.
But yeah, I mean, the timing wise, yeah, this is, probably to your point, Leigh Anne, a lot of these have been in the works for a while. Of course, if your fiscal year is starting now, it makes sense to have a transition at this point. And it's just a good week to get the year off started with some news. So yeah, I don't think there's anything weird about the fact that we've had a lot of transitions in the C-suite. Mostly, I'm just thinking about how some of these will transpire. I'm really interested in Beto Guajardo going to Blaze Pizza. That's a company that I think needs some help. I think they have they were once touted as being the fastest growing restaurant company in America. And, now they're not even, Mod Pizza's really, I think, taken the lead as a fast casual pizza player. So Blaze does need some new direction. And I think Guajardo is a really interesting addition coming from Focus Brands. So that's an interesting move. John Sawinski, I think we're still, at the time you're listening to this, we might know know where he's landing, but at this moment we do not. But, we all have enjoyed our interviews with him in the past. He's a great leader. Wherever he's going is lucky to have him, so it'll be interesting to watch what happens there. So, yeah, in general, it's just how do these things shake out for their new companies? How does new leadership help to take a company in a new direction, particularly a company that might really need a new direction?
Yeah, I did a story a couple of years ago, so my statistical data is a little bit murky, but the C-suite longevity in the restaurant space is between 3 and 5 years. It's a hard industry, and if you think about that number, and think about what these leaders, these executives have gone through in the past 3 years. We talk about the acceleration of technology. We talk about everything being accelerated because of the pandemic. I think it's important to talk about the acceleration. I don't want to say burnout, because I'm not speculating that anybody's going to a new job because of burnout. But we are in the workforce. We know how hard it's been. And to, imagine leading organizations with essential workers through the past 2 to 3 years is unfathomable to me. And I think that, the turnover that we have seen at certain companies, the turnover that we've seen, in the industry, whether or not it's anomalous, I don't think it's that anomalous, but I do agree there seems to be a bigger uptick than usual. I can't imagine that's not some type of factor. Again, I hate being speculative, but you just think about the workforce and how it's changed the industry and how it's changed. And, I think about John at Applebee's. He's literally done everything he could to right that ship after casual dining went through it, and to get back to net new unit growth. And so, that I think has to be something that is a consideration with this conversation.
If I may throw out a metaphor, we're coming up on NFL coaching carousel season as well, which,
don't do
oh
it.
my God, we can't get into sports now.
Which
I named my cat after Harbaugh. My cat's name is Harbaugh.
and Harbaugh himself could soon be on an NFL team. But Leigh Anne and I know very well that this is usually let's have the Cleveland Browns find a new coach season, which is usually a very distracting week for me. I say this because the carousel is truly that, because you have all this talent on the market at the same time, and then everybody just kind of finds new jobs and settles in new places. And so maybe there's some of that going on here too, which is just like, this is the time of year where there's going to be a lot of movement because there's a lot of talent on the market. And by the way, we might focus a lot of our labor attention on frontline employees, of course, but from a labor standpoint, executives are highly valuable too. And so with so many restaurant companies out there, to find a good executive, that's a key hire. Last thing I'll say too is I remember speaking to a CEO once who, noted that he noted his expiration date on his own job. He didn't say he was planning to leave, but he just said, I will not be here forever. These men and women know that, it's rare to have a CEO stay in a position for 20, 30 years anymore, unless, you started as like a cashier or you started the company. And so there's just some natural rhythms of transition that happen in executive positions. And again, we just kind of see that playing out now.
Well, another thing we're seeing play out is people really suffering from the fact that there's not a lot of business going on. Inflation is there. We're seeing a lot of jobs increase, and we're seeing a lot of people have to pay more for their employees. And so rent delinquency has been really high. I think it was 52%, Alicia, in December, which is outrageous. So what do you guys think about the fact that all of these factors are contributing to restaurants suffering in a month when they should have been thriving?
To go to the rent delinquency survey, I do want to note that survey was a small sample. It was just over 3,000 operators, but most surveys are about 3,000 people, 5,000 people. I actually just wrote a story about the National Restaurant Association's outlook for 2023, which included 3,000 people. So the rent delinquency survey has been a real big interest of mine for the past, they've been doing this, I think, since 2020. it's been ominous every month, whether we have, 30% or higher. I mean, that's just a big chunk of people unable to pay their rent, and rent prices are going up because, right, we have an ecosystem. Landlords have to pay more for everything as well. So they have to take pricing, just like restaurants are taking pricing, and consumers have to pay that. And where does this cycle stop? I'm unsure, but I can tell you the outlook from the National Restaurant Association was a little bit ominous with a little bit of optimism. And I feel like I've been writing about that for the past, since I came on board in October. And well before that, this year has been really interesting, and that's the only word I can use to describe it. Operators are dealing with higher prices. They're dealing with supply chain shortages, but consumers have shown they still have tremendous pent-up demand, and they're still willing to pay those prices. So it could be worse. I guess.
Love that optimism.
That was some optimism.
It could be worse. And look, I'll say this because I think that this is a really important point. These operators have been through hell and back again throughout the past 3 years. They're going to find a way. They know how to be more creative. They know how to be more innovative. They know how to be more efficient now because they were forced to learn how to do that in the throes of the pandemic. And that crisis is going to bode well for them, hopefully, as they continue navigating higher prices. That's my hope.
I'm curious to know how many people are following the Elon Musk model here, just saying, you know what, I'm just not going to pay rent and see how that goes. Of course, he doesn't quite have a landlord like a restaurant landlord. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a nice reminder of how we focus a lot of our attention on chain restaurants. And this is a good reminder that there's a disparity between the independents and the major chains, and even just larger systems, which is that independents continue to suffer. And as much as we talk about, being post-pandemic, to Alicia's point, they've been to hell and back, but they're not all the way back, right? They're still a little bit in hell. There's still so much going on. And so again, just a reminder, and we've talked about the RRF on this podcast before, and how much there is still a need for so many restaurants out there. And it's a lot of these independents that it's not necessarily that they can't get business back. It's just that they're dealing with this, that, and the other things still. And so when you add to that the rising interest rates and inflation and rising food costs, just so many factors, then rent becomes one of those things which they might just fall back on. And unfortunately, there's a lot of not so great landlords out there. So I'm hoping that rent delinquency doesn't lead to lots of restaurant closures. Hopefully they're finding solutions, working with landlords. I think this would be as good as time as any if you're a restaurant landlord. Have some compassion, just because just knowing what your restaurant tenants are going through and will continue to go through. I think there is optimism. There's relief on the other side. Yes, we're probably going into recession, but there's that could bring with it some relief too. So hopefully we'll see some of that in 2023.
Relief in 2023, hope in 2023. That's a beautiful note to end on, guys. What a positive ending to our podcast.
Go us, optimism.
Right? I feel like that was a great way to end it. I'm so proud of us for being optimistic. I mean, Leigh Anne's not talking, so maybe that's why.
I don't want to bring us down again.
I think she's weeping. I think she's not talking because she's crying from how hard things are. But
I think it's interesting that your takeaway was that we ended on optimism when Sam mentioned that we're probably going into a recession.
Holly's like, that's such a beautiful thing.
Look at the bright side, though.
So McDonald's is going to kick some ass.
They always do.
Good for them. They're struggling. I worry.
I did go to McDonald's in London, and it was incredible. So I will say,
that's what you said. I'm fascinated by that.
It was incredible. So I will say,
they also have a very robust McPlant platform over there, and I'm really super jealous of that. But apparently, it's a different product. I was trying to figure out if I could do a story about why the McPlant won't catch on here when it's thriving in, European markets, but they won't talk to me about it.
Well,
So
they're
McDonald's,
listening.
McDonald's, if you're listening, Alicia would like to talk to you about your McPlant.
Let us tell that story.
Let us tell your story, McDonald's. You've been so quiet. Nobody knows anything about McDonald's. Just kidding. Everybody knows everything about them. Well, so you guys, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been lovely, a real pleasure, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy
Cheers.
New Year.
Holly, Happy New Year.